Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this Wednesday night live stream. Totally different. It is not a usual Sunday. I was hoping that we would have this live stream on Sunday, but to some of your disappointment, you're here listening to me and a couple of gun content creators complain about YouTubers not making money. Or do we? So today we have a really special treat for you guys. Somebody who I've come to call a friend, somebody who's making a big impact for the industry. And one of the reasons why I love these guys, both Ed and the company, is that for anybody, for the 40% of gun owners who are behind what I call behind enemy lines or who live in restricted or banned states, Darkstorm Industries has been one of the main companies that has created firearms that no matter what state you're in, they have a firearm that is going to be there for you. So we had a bunch of new stuff come out. So DSI as a company, they've came up with a lot of new guns that some of you were excited to get the updates on. So we wanted to do that. And then a couple of days ago, something almost a little bit unexpected, at least unexpected to me, came, which was some federal guidelines, I would say, or a federal decision on those pistol braces. So I wanted to see what's the brace and what the bracing is all about. So welcome, Ed. Hello, my friend.
Hi, good evening.
Thanks for joining us. So I got that email from you. It was very, very exciting news. So we're going to get right into that. But for those who are not familiar with Darkstorm Industries, I know I am, a bunch of our viewers in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania would be. But for those not familiar, introduce yourself and introduce DSI to the world.
Sure. So Darkstorm Industries is a firearms manufacturer and retailer. We started out in New York about 12 years ago now. And we've grown to expand where we have manufacturing operations now in both New York and Florida. We developed for the AR-15 platform. We've also done some dabbling with the AR-10 and the AR-9. And obviously, I've seen some questions here already on our DS-25 platform, and I'll give you an update on that later. So we have kind of a specialty in coming from a restricted state. We've put a lot of effort into developing products, intellectual property that are a fit for people that live behind enemy lines, so to speak. And sadly, that number over the last year or so has grown to now include 30% of the US population. It's only a few states, but it's a lot of big states with big populations, and that has the effect. In general, our firearms are on the higher end of the market. We put a lot of effort into producing a premium product, better quality materials, better finishes, better attention to tolerances. Our factory in Florida is down on the Space Coast, and we'll often say that we're building our products to aerospace tolerances as compared to mil specs. Mil spec might be plus or minus 4 thousandths, give you a relative. A thousandth is the 4 thousandths is about the thickness of a piece of paper. So where we might hold the tolerance for that same dimension to plus or minus 1 thousandth. So the goal is to have less play in your receiver, less wiggle between parts when you're actually firing the rifle, which produces a more accurate rifle.
Very cool. And for those that are fortunate enough to live in a free state, so when we're talking about banned states, what type of differences are those rifles going to be?
So there's a lot of different configurations depending on which state. And although a lot of these laws have come and originated from the same anti-gun groups, the language that's been adopted by the states has changed and morphed over the years as they try to work around our workarounds. I'll say sometimes it's kind of like the 1980s with the radar detectors and the radar guns. The police got a new radar gun, and then they developed a new radar detector. But in that case, it was the same companies doing both sides. So, probably the biggest, broadest encompassing one is our fixed magazine, and we're on our second generation of that now. And you basically, for most of the states, you have a full featured AR-15. So you'll have your pistol grip, your adjustable stock, your flash hider, but the magazine is fixed in at the factory and non-removable. And what that gains you is it gains you that exit ramp out of the tests for the quote unquote assault weapon. So with that, you're able to purchase and possess those firearms in all 50 states.
Yeah. And so, speaking of probably one of the most innovative things within the firearms industry, and that's whether you're in a restrictive state or you live in a free state, has been that pistol brace. So, if anybody who's been living, let's say, Pennsylvania and Florida, they use pistol braces to stabilize their pistol, their AR pistols. And we had that, and then for the banned states, I think one of the ways that DSI really grew their business and their household recognition was for the non-NFA, or what we call other firearms, and the pistol braces being used there as well. So the pistol brace. Obviously, everybody learned and loved it, and then everybody at the end of last year, everyone started panicking because the ATF had a different interpretation of what a pistol brace is or what it does for a firearm. So for anybody who, let's say, for example, over 50s or over 60s, or they literally bought a gun 2 or 3 years ago, kept it in a closet, and are like just waking up and like, wait, what the heck is going on with it? Um, Sum up what the heck the challenge was with the pistol braces, and then we'll go into, well, what happened as of about a week ago.
Yeah, so there's quite a history with pistol braces. The ATF has gone back and forth actually a number of times over the years as to what is legal and what is not legal. For a lot of you in New Jersey, if you've seen some of the documents that the state police attached to the letter they developed when they said the non-NFAs were good, you'll see one of our ATF determination letters, which is actually a version with not a pistol brace on the back, but a different rear device. I don't even know what to call it. So that was done during a period when the braces were no good. Then they came back into acceptance for a while, and they really took off in popularity. Then what happened is we got a new administration, and one of their directives from the top, presumably, was to get rid of these pistol braces. And so the ATF, they couldn't do it on a legislative move in through Congress. So the ATF was charged with trying to figure out how to do that. So there's something called the Administrative Procedures Act, and you'll hear a lot about that as you start learning about this. And that requires that they publish any proposed rules, and this would be a rule in the Federal Register, and then it has to mull for a while, and people get to make comments on it. And that was done in July of 21. And one of the things in that was this form. It's called a 4999. Interestingly, it is still up on the ATF's website, and that provided a set of criteria to determine if a firearm with a brace is a pistol or it is a rifle. And they really didn't touch on non-NFAs too much. And actually, one of the prerequisites in that was that the weapon must have an overall length between 12 and 26 inches. For those of you familiar with the non-NFA category, it has to be greater than 26 inches. So as originally proposed by the ATF, the firearm non-NFAs were going to be okay. But then what they did is they went through all the comments, and they put out a report with I think it was like 1,000 pages in there, addressing a lot of the comments, and mostly not in a fashion those leaving the comments liked. And they basically issued a new rule, a final rule, and scrapped this entire point system on the 4999, and effectively just said anything with a brace becomes a short-barreled rifle. So that was a major deviation from the proposed rule, and that'll be very important when we get back to that in a minute. So then what happened is obviously we had the problem. Everybody with braces had to do something about it. There were some time periods if you wanted to register it as a SBR, kind of, but not an SBR, which again, we'll come back to some quirks with that. But the end result is basically the ATF made them illegal on pretty much everything. And we had to deal with that. So obviously that was a big hit to our company, to a lot of our customers and dealers. So what has happened subsequently is once that final rule was filed, there were a number of lawsuits that were filed by different gun rights organizations as well as some individuals. And they've been working their way through the legal system. And you've probably heard little bits of cheer every once in a while when something would be issued, an order would be issued for an injunction. But all of the early, I believe there were two early preliminary injunctions, and they were both issued only for the plaintiffs in that case. So it didn't affect you or I. So then what happened is one of those cases, and that was Mock v. Garland in Texas, made its way up to the Fifth Circuit. So not to get into too much legal geek here, but the federal courts are in three levels. There's the district or trial courts, there's the appellate courts, which are the circuit courts in the middle, and then there's the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the United States. All the circuit courts and the district courts are considered inferior courts, and that's the language right out of the Constitution. So what happened with the Fifth Circuit is they said, well, we don't think that the one decision which denied the preliminary injunction was correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to vacate that or get rid of that decision, and we're going to send it back to the district courts to reconsider. And they gave some instructions, as they would normally in that. And one of the things they said, well, we're not sure if a nationwide injunction really would be appropriate, but maybe it would be under certain circumstances. And they kind of threw that out as a mixed answer. So in the background, while this is all going on in these two cases from gun rights organizations were kicking around, there was another one in the background, and that's called Brito. Darren Brito, and actually when it was originally filed, it had two other plaintiffs on it. Those are three individuals. I believe they were all service-disabled veterans, and that's who the braces were originally developed for. And when those initial injunctions were appealed to the Fifth Circuit, so that's the middle-level courts, what happened is the judge in Brito said, well, we know this is going to have the decision in that is going to have an impact us, so we're going to put our case on hold. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. And if you're one of the plaintiffs in one of those cases, it really sucks because then you're just sitting there waiting, twiddling your thumbs. But now what happened is the decision out of the Fifth Circuit sent it back, and I guess the judge was patiently waiting there in that case, and has now been the first to act back at the district court decisions. And a little bit to everybody's surprise, about a week ago now, he issued a preliminary injunction. There you go. That's the one right up there. And in that, he granted the motion, which is your motion for a preliminary injunction, to stay the rule in its entirety, period. Nice and simple. It's not restricted in terms of what plaintiffs or any other time thing. It simply says that rule is frozen. It does not exist as of right now. So basically what that did is that put us all in a time machine and took us back to, I'm going to say 2020, because all this mess started in 21. So it took us back to 2020 when pistol braces were illegal. You didn't have to get a fake tax stamp or whatever they're calling those giveaway stamps or not stamps. So we're back to being able to buy, sell, and possess a brace on any of your firearms.
Okay.
So that was great news.
So just to confirm, so with this ruling, does it just put things on pause, or does it basically say that's it, we're done, and then if the ATF or any of the agencies want to restart this process, they can just, or here's the question, can't they just basically do the same thing or redefine it a different way?
So there's a couple pieces here. This is a preliminary injunction, so it is relatively early on in this process, and anybody who's been involved in a legal process of any sort, this stuff drags out, and it's often by intention on both sides, just to drag things out. So the common practice would be, after something like this was issued, that the defendant, in this case the ATF, would apply for a appeal on that, and they would request that the judge stay or suspend that injunction. Now, that's quite likely that the ATF will apply for an appeal on it. Quite unlikely that the judge will issue a stay. Okay. So this freedom period will likely extend for a while. Now, what that would do is that would appeal it to the Fifth Circuit. And we talked about that before, that again, and that Fifth Circuit is where we've had a number of big Pro 2A decisions recently. So it's extremely unlikely that the Fifth Circuit would reverse that decision. So they're expected to keep that stay in place. Now, there is a scenario in which then that could happen, and then the ATF and so Department of Justice defends the ATF in these cases, and they are legally required to do that defense. So they can't just say, "Oh yeah, we're going to give up for now." So they could quite likely could request the Supreme Court weigh in on it. I don't think that's likely to happen, and the biggest reason of which is there's another case. So all this is brewing in the background, and we're talking about pistol braces tonight. But there's another piece, and you got to understand that the Supreme Court, and while we love to have them deal with a lot of this stuff, there's 1,000 other industries and individuals out there that would love to have them deal with their stuff. So they've got to pick and choose. And they have a couple criteria that they apply internally. One of which is they look for cases that are fully adjudicated. That means they've been through the whole process, all the appeals, before they take them on. And pistol braces are not even close to that. So this would be called interlocutory. So that's an early on in the process. So these cases are not ready for the Supreme Court. But there's something else that is, and that is bump stocks. Remember bump stocks? So that goes back about 3 or 4 years earlier. And one of those cases, Cargill, which is a gun dealer out of Texas, his challenge against the ATF is fully adjudicated. So earlier this year, he applied to the Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari, which is basically them accepting the case. And honestly, to a lot of people's surprise, they accepted the case. So that will be scheduled for arguments probably in the spring. I'm not sure if there's a date on that yet. But what I think that case will do is that case will be the heller for all of the mechanics here. Pistol braces, magazines, quite possibly assault weapon bans, because those are really features. So all of these accessories and features, I think what will happen is we'll get an actual decision on that. I would speculate the end of next year. And once that happens, all of anything that's going on with pistol braces, with magazines, all of that stuff will then get, and this is one of the things that sucks about our judicial system, but is all that stuff will get sent back to the district court level, to the lowest level again. It's kind of like you're playing the game and you go Chutes and Ladders. I play with my 6-year-old, and you go back down the ladder to back down the slide to the beginning, and that's kind of what happens. And we saw a lot of that after Bruin. But what it does is it does give the opportunity for those cases to get corrections made to them in the decisions. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this, but I think likely this freedom period on this braces will survive for a little while, because I think Supreme Court's not going to want to touch it. Fifth Circuit is comfortable with what it's at right now, so that's going to roll for a bit.
Okay. So for those that are not legal scholars or attorneys, if somebody has a pistol brace that they had in the past and they didn't register it, and basically they didn't know, they just woke up and like, wow, I didn't know this stuff was coming out. Is it safe for them to go to the range and actually shoot the thing? Is it safe for it to come out of hiding? Or, as there is a question, would this only, let's say, for example, apply to like Freedom Week magazine? So anytime that there is a California thing with magazines, it seems like people are rushing out to buy magazines at that point, and then it gets shut down. So does it apply to all pistol braces, certain pistol braces, or pistol braces that somebody needs to go out and purchase right now?
So the simplest answer to this is we are back in 2020.
Okay.
So can you have a pistol brace on the back of a pistol or a firearm non-FA or even a rifle? And the answer is right now, yes, you can.
Okay.
Here's the caveat: as long as it's not illegal under your state law.
Okay.
So Jersey, you're still good. New York, as we've gone through the last couple year process, passed legislation that banned anything other than basically a pistol, revolver, rifle, or shotgun. Okay. So interestingly, so in New York, it is illegal to have a firearm non-FA. It is also illegal to have a pass load nail gun. A little too broad. Connecticut, same thing. Along the way, now Connecticut made a change and banned semi-automatic center fire.
Wow.
Yes. So unfortunately, in those states, they're not able to go back to 2020. But New Jersey and then any of the free states, yes, you can
Hmm.
put the pistol braces back on. You can buy pistol braces if you can find them. You can buy firearms with pistol braces on them.
Okay.
Although the reality is what was being sold in the interim is pretty much the same exact gun, just without the attachment on the back.
Exactly. Okay. So then here's a well, I guess you kind of answered the question. So what you made the announcement that DSI is going to start selling firearms once again that are going to have with pistol braces. Um, is there any legal ramifications? I'm sure there's going to be some dealers who are potentially watching this and they might have questions. Okay, well, should I get into this? Should I do this? Or is the state going to come after me because they don't agree with this decision for one reason or another?
So on the state level, there's always the chance that a state could pass a new regulation. In general, on the state level, especially, it's going to be a law because it has to change the actual language. Could New Jersey do that? Because New Jersey is obviously the big group that we're talking about here. Yes, they could. As far as I know, nothing has been proposed in New Jersey yet. So, again, unlikely. One of the big risks with Freedom Weeks, and in particular when you're in a scenario like out in California, that's where you have these Freedom Weeks, is where the judge will implement that order of an injunction, and then, okay, it's freedom, time to go. But the Ninth Circuit, or the Ninth Circus, as it's often called, is very anti-gun, and often they will overturn that and stay that. So there's only a very short period of time where that injunction is in effect, and those are the Freedom Weeks when all of a sudden, people are, trying to buy mags, and we're doing overnight shipping of, thousands of magazines to California. Um, what happens after that? What happens after this is fully adjudicated is an unknown. While it's, in my opinion, unlikely we will lose in the end, and one of the key tests to issue a preliminary injunction is the likelihood that the plaintiff will succeed on their merits. So it's likely that the judges has to rule that it's likely that we will win before they can issue the preliminary injunction. So that's the expectation that we're going to win. So theoretically, what happens if we don't? Well, this is where we get into a lot of weird scenarios. If the injunction is reversed, effectively, you would own the gun before, as if you had bought it in 2020. But, and this is a big problem in Illinois right now with their fight for the Illinois assault weapons ban, or PICA as it's called, the regulations regarding the registration, if you wanted to do that free tax stamp scenario, that period has ended. So that would likely not be a viable option for any guns that are brought in a freedom period. It would likely have to be that just the brace would have to get removed and disposed, or fall off the end of the dock into the lake. So that would be a scenario. Now, there's a lot of other scenarios that come into play here. As I mentioned before, something called the APA, or the Administrative Procedures Act. All this rulemaking on the federal level is done under that. All these challenges, like this win here in Brito, is really an APA win. It's a process win. It's not a Second Amendment win. This really hasn't been adjudicated about that at all yet. So there are scenarios where the ATF could say, well, we're going to rescind that rule, that final rule. Well, now we're back to 2020 again. That's good. But they could then issue a new final rule more in line with the original proposed rule. And that would moot these cases, or basically shut down these cases, and everything would have to start from scratch. Or they could scratch all this entirely and propose a new, completely different rule, which then would, again, reset everything back to zero. They'd have to publish that. We'd have to have public comments, but then they could put a final rule in place. And we did see some of that in the Second Amendment front with a case a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, over New York City. And the question was whether you could, if you had a New York City premises license, a license to keep a pistol or rifle in your house, could you take it, for example, to New Jersey to a shooting range? And they had said, no, you can't. So that was challenged. It made its way to the Supreme Court. And then NYPD, NYC, and New York State all kind of panicked and said, oh, poop, we need to fix this. We do not want to lose this case in court. And they quickly passed a state law that said, no, you can do that, and it would be illegal for New York City to implement this regulation again. And then what happened is that case was considered moot. So the Supreme Court dismissed the case as moot. That ultimately led to the Bruin case. So in the end, it probably worked out a lot better for us that we went down that road. But there's a lot of when it comes to this type of legal arguments and constitutional law in federal court, it's definitely a game of chess, if not 3D chess, with a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different moves that can be played. But yeah, so right now what we're back to is, again, you're back to 2020. You can buy the brace, you can have the brace, you can sell the braces. I don't think this is going to be a freedom week. Again, I think this is going to be expected that this will last for months, if not probably, I would say at least a year and change until Cargill. Again, that's the bump stock case, gets the final decision out of the Supreme Court. That may mix some of this up with OVRs, which is an order to vacate and remand, or basically sending it back to the lower courts to reconsider things. So that could mix it up a little bit, but we're at least a year away on that.
Very cool. So basically what it seems like, and summing it up to the people, so from this audience, we are on YouTube, we are on Twitter and a couple other platforms. So we have people not just from the banned states, that people, how I would say a lot of people learned about DSI, but rather also we have audiences from free states as well. So for free America, basically you can go, you can buy pistol, you can have any pre-ban or post-ban configuration. You can have, if as the pistol braces were, they're just the same. For New Jersey, if we're talking about pistol braces in the non-NFA or / other firearm configuration, for Jersey, it's back to being cool. However, for Connecticut and New York, where these firearms were quite popular, they're no longer kosher because in the meantime, New York and Connecticut passed other laws redefining what a firearm has to be.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So here's a question. I know in the gun community, there's a meme going around, which is basically it's a bunch of kids pointing and laughing at anybody who registered for their amnesty tax stamps. So I have 3 DSI matched upper and lower receiver sets that are registered, and 2 of so a variant 1 and another rifle that I registered, and I got my free tax stamps. So what happens to all of those tax stamps that people were able to get for free? From the question of, so let's say, for example, it's one thing if you got it and you took the pistol brace off and you put on a stock, a proper stock, but what if you registered that firearm as an SBR and it has the pistol brace on there still? Is it no longer an SBR? Or what's the deal with that? Or has anybody ever given that any thought?
So this is completely unknown territory in many, many ways. So I'll be honest, you're the first person I know that's actually did register these. So I have to ask a curiosity question because I've heard rumors. Did you actually get a stamp or no?
So it's not a physical stamp. So it's all e-forms now. So the same exact way as you're getting an e-form for a suppressor, it's the exact same thing. So what they did was when you did the amnesty, they had a separate site that they did for that. And it's still the exact same process, but it didn't ask you for payment at the end. And then once that was submitted and that May date was cut off, all of them for the approvals, I go into my regular e-form system and it was right there with the rest of them. But actually, while you're discussing this, I am going to look up my tax stamp and see about that.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point that the e-forms don't come with physical stamps anymore. So that would make sense. Yeah. So it's a strange question because this is really a tax. It's not
but it was a tax. So the thing of it is the way that they did it and the form itself, there's a box there that says tax exempt registration.
Correct. And like, that's the concept that's normally used for, say, a short barreled rifle that's purchased by a law enforcement agency. So yeah, again, you're into very unknown territories with that. I would say, our attorneys tell us, I think it's a very defensible position. You have a tax stamp. it is what it is. It's a tax stamp that says you can have an SBR. So I'd probably say you're probably safe with that right now. One thing to note on SBRs in the NFA is if you take a registered SBR and you put a 16-inch barreled upper on it, it's still an SBR. It's registered by serial number by that lower receiver as an SBR, and it has to be treated as an SBR regardless of what configuration it is currently in. It's assuming a temporary configuration. If you make a permanent configuration change to it, you can send a letter to the NFA division, and you can, you actually are required to send a letter to them and notify them of the change in length, for example. And if you permanently wanted to change it back to a rifle, in concept, you could do so, and they would remove it from the registry. Well, it would still show in the registry, be in the registry, because you can never get out of the registry, but it would be in there as no longer an SBR.
Okay. So while you are discussing this, I can't pull up the form. Well, I'm not going to pull up the form because it has a whole bunch of serial numbers and my full address and email and phone number. But so basically there is a box now. It is an E-Form 1 application, 1140-0011, application to make or register firearm, and then for type of application. So there's box A, tax paid, there's box B, tax exempt, and now there's box C, which is tax exempt. Firearm is not subject to making tax to Title 26 USC 7801, 7805. To confirm the application qualifies for tax-free registration, ATF may require additional supporting documents such as photographs or firearm to be registered. So yeah, there is no tax stamp. It is just basically just approved. It has your photo, and it's otherwise like any other Form 1, just updated for that. And then
That
on the
different
bottom,
checkbox.
and then on the bottom under approval conditions, it says pursuant to ATF Final Rule 2021 R-08F. So basically we do say like, and I'll email it to you so you can take a look on there. But it was basically like a question. So, I mean, on half of mine, I already took off the pistol brace because let's be honest. I mean, one of the reasons I was excited about it is, well, the pistol brace is cool, but a stock is better. So when you have the ability to, oops, sorry, you're still there. So when you have the ability to get a free SBR, why wouldn't you? Now, one of the arguments to that is, well, you're registering it unnecessarily, and you're giving the feds your information. I'm like, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong. The states, the feds, they have all the records anyway. Like, if they wanted to find you as a gun owner, they probably can, right?
Once you get to a certain point, yeah, and that was I had that conversation with a few people, and I'm like, listen, if you already have SBRs and you already have suppressors, and you just want a free stamp, then yeah, what, it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah.
But if you don't have anything, if you're not currently on that federal radar, that's a different view of it, and a lot of people took that view. And again, a lot of people viewed it as there's so much of this going on, it's so unconstitutional. There's again a lot of APA issues with this, technical non-2A issues. It's not likely to survive, 10-year time frame. So, why bother with it? Pop the braces off, throw them in the lake, and we'll go get them later.
Now, as far as you are aware, was anybody actually prosecuted for having the braces between the time that the rule went into effect and we got this injunction? We got the stayed?
I have not heard of anybody prosecuted on a federal level.
Okay.
I know there were a number of arrests and charges cases in New York.
Okay.
And there was some question in New York all along of their legality. And while they met the in concept letter of the law the same as they had in Connecticut and New Jersey, New York had a couple other quirky things. So one of the things in New York is it is illegal to possess a firearm. And you say, well, how does that make sense? And they define a firearm as basically any illegal gun. So one of the challenges when we were looking at litigating that in New York is how do you present this to a jury that likely is not that 2A competent, and say, well, this is not a rifle, this is not a pistol, it is a firearm. That's what the ATF classifies it in. But yet at the same time, how do we overcome? We've convinced them it's a firearm, but New York says firearms are illegal.
Yeah.
And it was just, we figured we were going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and just not be able to get there. And even if we got there, the concern is if we got there and we want to say, hey, we beat New York State, all they had to do was go to the legislature, like they eventually did, and just create a new law and specifically make it illegal. And since they have a supermajority in both chambers, it was something they could do easy enough. So unfortunately, yeah, New York was kind of a lost cause with that. But they did prosecute a few people. I believe most of them, those cases, they settled and did not actually put people in jail. One was a dealer, and I know they paid a large cash settlement out to the state over that. I'm not sure what the final disposition of some of the individual cases were.
Okay.
But
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I recall explicitly when the ATF director during the congressional hearings were basically saying, hey, this is our rule, but we don't intend on going door to door and arresting gun owners for possessing a pistol brace. However, well, technically that wouldn't say anything or stop anybody at the local level from doing that if they truly wanted to go out and actually do that.
So really where that problem comes into play, it's great to say, well, we're not going to go, kick down doors and start looking for, okay, yeah, that's probably true. But what could happen is you get a variety of scenarios where the firearm falls into law enforcement hands. And that could be a divorce situation where there's a threat made and the judge issues a restraining order against both parties, which happens, thousands of times a day probably across this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Rahimi case is going to be one of the interesting factors in that. It's another conversation. But and then those firearms have to get turned in.
Okay.
Okay, so now what happened? Oh, you've got an illegal firearm. Well, now we have a problem. Home defense. Somebody breaks into your house and you shoot them. Is the gun legal? Is one of the questions that's going to get asked. I mean, that was one of the things that happened early on in New York State after the SAFE Act. We came out with this fixed mag rifle, and we had one that we had sold to a customer, and he ended up using it for a home defense shooting. And the police seized the firearm as they normally would, and because of what it was, they said, "Well, is this legal?" And they went through and did an analysis on it, and they determined that the gun was legal. It is not an assault weapon because it was a fixed mag. And they analyzed the shooting, and they said, it was on the front lawn, which is in New York a little more exciting. But they said he returned fire after being fired upon, and they deemed it a good shoot, and everything was eventually released back to him.
Awesome.
But there are scenarios again where those guns can come into hands where of law enforcement, where they will be evaluated. One of the firearm non-NFA cases in New York is the gentleman had it in his trunk. He had driven to Pennsylvania, I guess did some shooting with his friends, stopped to grab some fireworks on the way back.
That was local, so that was about 15 minutes away from me. And here's the thing.
And he got tagged for the fireworks, which led to the non-NFA issue.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, though. Like, I mean, he might have been completely fine with the firearms, but if you go fireworks I mean, this is a huge thing. If you're in a border state, every 4th of July, everybody comes down, and right across the border in Pennsylvania from New Jersey, you have massive fireworks stores. They sell crazy prices, but that's because in New York and New Jersey, those fireworks go for a lot more money. And everybody here knows that they're off-duty New Jersey State Police and New York troopers that just hang out there, and they see New York tags, and half the cars are New York and New Jersey tags in Pennsylvania buying these fireworks. It's easy to identify them. They will just follow you till you cross back into New Jersey or cross into New York. And then, hey, how are you, sir? Do you have anything you shouldn't have in your car? And well, outright, you just lied. And so I think, I don't remember if you told me or somebody, or I read it somewhere. I'm like, oh my God, facepalm moment, because here you are, you're getting busted for firearms, but it wasn't even anything firearms related. So I mean, granted, it's a whole different topic, whether it's constitutional or not, but just don't be an idiot. It's like, it's simple. But I digress. Okay, so pistol braces, basically, we're going, things are as they were, with the exception of New York and Connecticut, where it doesn't really make any, now it's not going to make any difference because you have new state laws in the books.
Correct.
Okay.
So we did start last week. We did start shipping braced guns again. So
Awesome.
I think you'll start seeing those in some dealers. And I know we're working on some Black Friday specials with a couple dealers in New Jersey. So you may
Awesome.
see some exceptionally well priced non-NFAs out there on
Awesome.
Black Friday.
All right, fantastic. So, switching topics a little bit, every year, DSI is one of the companies that I know I can go to and play with some really cool new ideas. I would say probably one of the biggest hits that you've had in the last year and a half, is it almost close to 2 now? No, it's a bit less than that, is the DS-25. So I know we were having a conversation before, "Hey, Ed, do you have any plans on making an AR-10?" And you're like, "No, we got something a little bit better." Then one of your employees came over to the private range here. I shot it. I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is super, super cool." Then we went to SHOT Show. You did the launch there for the product. Lots of people shot it. Everyone loved it. They loved the concept of it. They loved the features that you're able to get for the value that it would provide it. And people are wondering, hey, kind of what's going on with
What's
it?
going on with it? Okay.
What's so I guess for those that don't know, what's the DS-25? And then for those that do know what the DS-25 is, what's going on with it?
Sure. So the DS-25 is we took the concept of the AR-15 and the AR-10 and blended them together. So fundamentally what it is, it's an AR-15 that's chambered in .308 Winchester. And that had been done on different extents by at least 2 other companies prior to us. There was a third that had messed around with it. I don't think they ever went to production. DPMS had their mid-frame, a little bigger, and then Patriot Ordnance came out with the first one that was truly AR-15 sized, but it had a significant number of proprietary components in it at that point. So we wanted to try to do so, and as a result of that, it was an extremely expensive rifle. So we wanted to do something kind of as we do more in the mid-range. So we set about trying to see how can we do this with as few differences as possible, as much as possible, leverage our existing components, existing CNC processes and work holdings, so I can make for example, a bolt carrier on the same machine with the same setup. So it's just literally picking a different programming and hitting go, or close to that. So we developed that, and initially we went through all our original testing. We ran prototypes at first. They ran well through our testing, and then we did a small initial production run, and again those ran very well. And then what we did is we started to do more testing and branching out, and started to respond to some feedback of some malfunctions. And what we found is that the .308 7.62 51 market has a very wide range of ammunition out there. And we did our testing with we'll call it a relatively small sampling of that, primarily of the better quality stuff. Although, I mean, a lot of it was just Winchester, Lake City, relatively cheap 7.62 51. And the gun ran good with all that, but we found as we got to some of the specialty cartridges that had really long pointy noses, or the opposite, some of the cheaper import machine gun ammo, so to speak, that had really short cartridge length, we were seeing a higher rate of malfunctions than we were comfortable with. So we suspended any more production on that, and we started digging into how do we fix that. And it turned out to be quite a deep rabbit hole we went down. But the end result is we've developed some new components, primarily a change to the barrel extension, and we are waiting for the final prototypes of that back this complete barrels back this coming week or so, next probably 2 weeks, and then we're going to be able to go ahead and do a full set of cycle testing on that. And our goal is to meet certain testing parameters that we have developed. And I will say that those are pretty stringent. We have tested both of the other products that are sellable in that genre currently, and neither of them was able to meet the standard. That neither we were able to meet at that point either. But we're pretty hopeful that once we, with this new change, that we're going to be able to meet those functional parameters. And if so, then we'll release this back into production in the 308.
Yeah. So, not putting you on a spot or anything, would it be fair to say that hopefully by SHOT Show we should start seeing I guess, a final developed version or kind of like a production ready one now? Or I'm assuming
Yeah,
that it's gonna be a SHOT Show that people can play with it, but I guess would it be ready to ship soon after there?
probably would not be able to ship for SHOT Show. Probably would be, assuming everything goes well with the testing, we're probably looking at beginning of second quarter.
Okay.
So April, May of next year would be the hope on that.
Okay.
It's a, the manufacturing process is a long, slow process, and people
Okay.
that are not in it don't necessarily understand how long it takes to go from, okay, hey, we've got a final prototype now. Okay, so we got to, order barrel steel, or maybe you have some around. It's got to get drilled to the right size. It's got to get chambered. There's stress relieving involved. It's got to go out for heat treat, come back in, get the barrel extension put on, and so forth. And as things get busier, that gets harder to find time to squeeze in a new product.
So here's a question. I know one of the things that you're personally very proud of is that your firearms were made in the United States. They use U.S. components. You do a lot of the stuff in-house, or I guess if not all of it in-house. Is any of that changing for the DS-25? Are you outsourcing more of the manufacturing, or you'll be able to control this thing going forward?
So no, actually, the DS-25 has more parts made in house than most of the other rifles do, and that was kind of the impetus to start bringing more and more pieces in house, and we continue to do that. Probably the only, the really major component that we don't currently do in house is our barrels. That's another few $1,000,000 of infrastructure that we need to purchase, and we don't have the space or the power to do that in either of our current facilities. So we're hoping once we get new facility, final facility up and running in Florida, we can move everything into one house that we'll be able to move into that, and then we'll control basically all the major metal components in it. We're also moving more to making some of the small components in house. So some of the things, one of the things you'll see at SHOT Show is a new rifle. It's called the MFR. I can't talk too much about it, but there's a few other small specialty components in that are different than your standard ARs, and those are made in-house now at our facility in Florida.
Very cool. Definitely exciting about that. So I guess you skipped one of the questions I had ahead, which was, are we going to be able to see anything for SHOT Show? I know I'm always like giddy about basically what else is coming. And I guess here's a question for you. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to be thinking, isn't a AR and AR and a AR? It seems like everybody and their mother comes out with ARs. I guess it's also part of the reasons why you have certain big modern sporting rifle manufacturers declare bankruptcy. It seems like a bunch of others are teetering on a verge of there. So I guess kind of like the twofold questions are, where do you see the innovation, or what do you see as the trend in the black rifle market going forward? And then otherwise, like also now that it seems like so much of the demand that we've had over the last 3 years is pretty much done and eroded with. What is your take on the industry, and does that impact the innovation and the process? So, I mean, let's put it this way. What I'm referring to is when COVID basically hit, and you're talking to companies like, hey, anything you're planning on coming out with? We're like, well, why do we don't need to create new stuff when we can barely keep up with demand of existing stuff. So do you think now that things are slowing down, will that be the impetus to create new innovation, or is it going to get companies to start tightening their purse strings and it's going to be more of the same?
So one of the big challenges, this industry is a roller coaster of up and down of demand and sales, and that makes it very challenging. And you hit both points right on the head. When demand is in crazy spikes, like happened to COVID, and we've seen a few other times. Everything, it's just all hands on deck, making mostly just your core product, your basic 5.56, not even off calibers, not even 300 blackout or any of the other wildcat kind of cartridges. Just focus on black 5.56 guns, because that's the massive demand. So then what happens when it slows down? You're right. There are two things. A, we finally free up some time for engineering, for time to get on the machines. Because again, I have to take a machine out of production to start messing around with a new part. So we're finally starting to see companies, like including ourselves, have some time to be able to mess around. But at the same time, now what we have is we have a tightening of the belt, because the demand has slowed down so much. And that's one of the big, again, problems with that roller coaster. If we had a lot flatter of a trajectory, it would be much easier to innovate and keep up with demand. And there are, again, a lot of things that happen in the background that people don't necessarily see. Some of the materials that are go into an AR-15 are, I don't want to say totally unique, but uncommon elsewhere in the quantities that the AR-15 demands. So what'll happen is you'll have only a few companies, and we're talking about like metal mills and stuff now. We're not talking about companies that are making the final part, that produce a given thing. So like one of the problems out there right now is gas tubes. There's only one mill in the United States that produces that true mill spec stainless steel tube for gas tubes. And basically what they said is, you know what? We sat on some of it for a while. We're not going to, it's all sold, but we're not going to run it again until we see enough demand to really justify it. And then they just don't ship. So nobody can make gas tubes. And, it had to get to the point where there was enough backed up demand to order this material that they agreed to start running production again, and they're finally making some of that material again. So there's quirky things that happen on the back end. We saw a lot in the beginning of COVID, and even right before COVID, with the Trump tariffs on metal, on aluminum. It had a big impact. All of a sudden, we found that it was hard to buy 7075 because other companies were now purchasing that American 7075 versus imported material, because the imported material was now more expensive. And that's a good thing. I mean, that's good that we're bringing that production of aluminum, smelting aluminum, more back to the US, but we need to have that production capability to actually make enough to satisfy that demand. And then in the middle of that mix too, we had Ford start making the F-150s and the Expeditions with 7075 aluminum body panels. And that again had a big wonk in terms of demand on the market. Ford was buying a massive amount of metal all of a sudden that skewed the market.
Wow. So, and that's actually interesting. Like, you wouldn't ordinarily think about it. Like, hey, what do sales of Ford F-150s have to do with the firearms industry? But unless you
they have a big impact.
Unless you have control over even your sourcing and like you have your own foundries, I mean, you're still going to be subjected to that as well. And yeah, I mean, we saw a big spike in vehicle demand, but even now that has plummeted off of the cliff. And I suppose also kind of like when people are shopping for rifles, while ammo prices and primer prices are still fairly high, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you have a better read of the industry, both as a manufacturer and as a retailer. It seems like firearms prices are coming back down to reality. We're starting to see more price cuts now. Is this possibly the new trend going forward, I guess? And are we just going to be heading back to, let's say, your virus stage, or do you perhaps think that we're going to go back into like the bottom of the roller coaster? We're not going to flatten out at the bottom where we were, but we're potentially going to go even further than where we were.
So I think what you've seen is a substantial impact of wholesale inflation on the firearms industry. Again, we're the firearms industry is a mostly American industry. Even some of the brands like a Glock you still buy, most of those are still significantly made in the US now. So, we're at the whim of, fuel costs, trucking costs, regulatory impacts, metal costs. Again, all this stuff has gone up dramatically. I would say over the last 4 years, we've seen almost doubling in the price of a lot of the raw materials. So what you've seen is a lot of firearms manufacturers increase their prices, and those are increased you'll see first on the MSRP side. But then what's happened is when it really slows down, when it really gets bad, like it was this past summer, just like you'll see Ford put incentives on cars, firearms manufacturers put incentives to keep things moving, to keep the cash flowing. And that translates into generally programs for the dealers. Sometimes there's rebates. I know like Keltec did a rebate program also this past summer, but translates into deals for the dealers who then can pass those deals on to their customers. And that's where you see sometimes the pricing dropping off pretty low. And you've got the same kind of thing in ammo. Again, ammo is going up. You know, we buy ammo for testing and stuff from Winchester, from Hornady, from Federal. You know, we get the Lake City price list every time that comes out, and you know, we've been watching it. And it's been going up and going up. And you know, when we order, for example, Lake City ammo, that ammo we'll order it now. We're not going to get that for almost a year.
Wow.
So that time frame, you know, we have the visibility both backwards of knowing what it was and forwards. And, you know, we're at a place right now where you have people that had big contracts to buy ammo. And maybe we're getting, you know, a truckload every, you know, 2 weeks or something and filling up their warehouse. And they ordered that ammo 2 years ago. So it's at a pretty good price. But they're getting in and they're selling it. There are people selling retail ammo right now at less or the same, more about the same as new wholesale orders are going in. So ammo is not going to be going down, I think, anytime soon. It is only going to be going up. As far as the firearms themselves, I think as demand settles down again, you're going to see higher prices that are going to stick around.
Well,
You know,
but here's a question on that, and I think you're possibly going to answer this, but to clarify that one a little bit, at least my particular thought. So we have demand, which is falling off of a cliff, possibly a little bit stabilizing. Your input costs as a manufacturer have risen. I don't think they're coming back down to reality yet. So the question is, with falling demand and rising input costs, who's going to be the one who's going to be the most squeezed? Are manufacturers or dealers, are you going to have to be more profitable at a lower volume of sales, or are manufacturers going to go down the road of, okay, well, we got to discount it and try to make up for a lower margin with higher volume of sales, and just hoping that your input costs as a manufacturer are going to come down to kind of restore that order?
I think you're going to see a little bit of both. You're going to see some companies that are going to be increasing their prices and recognizing that they're not going to be able to sell as many firearms. And I'll be honest, that's probably along the line that we are. You know, we're continually trying to improve the product, and as costs go up, the pricing is going up. There are also companies that are out there looking for every way they can cut a corner. I mean, we've seen some stuff recently, you know, upper and lower receivers that are 6061 coming in from overseas.
Oh, wow.
And that, you know, getting finished here, but the raw material comes in from overseas. And then they just put a type 2 anodize on it, not a type 3 hard coat. So, you know, again, you can almost cut the cost of a given part in half using some of those methodologies. You know, what's the end result for the consumer? It's a different quality of product. And you've got to decide as an individual, you know, what do you want to buy? It's just like buying a car. You know, you can buy a car for, well, nowadays it's probably $25,000 for a lower end car, or do you want to spend $75,000 on something a lot nicer? And you know, there are companies that are going to move into, you know, both ends of the market to try to satisfy where the consumer demand is.
So it almost seems like, and from what you're saying and from what we're seeing in the industry, it seems like that I would say, quote unquote, the Gucci manufacturers are going to be able to increase their prices, and they're going to have enough fans and enough fanatical people, enough cultists, that they'll be able to justify it, aka Rolexes, your Louis Vuittons, etc. And then at the opposite end of it, you're going to have your large manufacturers that are going to squeeze their cost. They might go down in quality if they have to, in order to maintain the prices and increase sales. And the people who are going to get screwed are going to be companies such as yourself that try to create a quality product, but still at a price that gun owners would be able to afford.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things, and we're struggling with as a company, is where do we sit? Because it really seems to be a two-tier system, and we try to sit in the middle of that, and it's not a great place. It's kind of sitting on the fence, so to speak. So, you know, a great example is most of you guys out there are probably familiar with Ballistic Magazine, one of the flagship of the Athlon brands. So Ballistic has a best of issue that comes out every year in January. And they'll do reviews on a number of firearms in each category. I believe it's usually like give or take.
Mm-hmm.
So they had reached out to us earlier in the year, and it just went public now, so I can say that the variant one was in the running. So it's one of the ones they reviewed for the one of the best AR-15s. So now the interesting thing is it's AR-15s are broken into two categories. So they call them economy and premium. So the variant one is $1,800, $1,795.
Yeah.
That's an economy rifle on
What?
their classification. $2,000 is the split.
What?
So yeah, just to give you some idea, and it's been amazing as we've been, because we're going to make some pricing adjustments for 2024 in our methodology, and researching what other companies are. And when we start looking at MSRPs, it was mind blowing to see that, so many companies that the MSRPs are all over $2,000 now.
Yeah.
And it was not what you thought. It was a Gucci gun. It's a staple workhorse AR-15.
Yeah.
2,000, 2,300, 2,100. They're selling in the teens. They're not selling at those prices. Correct. But, wow, that's a significant change from where we saw it a couple of years ago when it was the lower teens to mid-teens is where the majority of the market was sitting.
All right. So we're geeking out on the business side of the firearms industry. Final question before we get to our audience that has some really awesome questions. But so the higher MSRPs, I do know for a fact. So for example, with Ruger, when they came out with the Wrangler pistol, super awesome value. They had an MSRP for $199, and it was launched right before all of the riots and all of that stuff. And they were kind of hoping that the street price was going to be about 180. And you had these manufacturers who were basically saying, hey, we could sell this for a lot more. And it's like, we want to sell it for 250, but the MSRP is 199. So you're not leaving us any room on the table. And I guess almost the same thing that we saw in the vehicle space, in the car space, when everybody and their mother, when everybody got free money from the government, they went out and they started buying trucks. And Ford, so we had these massive market adjustments. So then to combat that and to avoid the bad looks, the manufacturers started raising the MSRPs. So wouldn't this basically be the same thing in the gun industry? So manufacturers are raising MSRPs, but will it actually have an impact on the street price or not? And wouldn't this be primarily for manufacturers that are going through a two-tier distribution system, such as going through distributors and then dealers, rather than a company that still sells a healthy amount of rifles direct to consumer through their website? Let's say, for example, such as DSI, such as PSA, and others.
Yeah, so that's one of the things is, we saw in the vehicle market that the dealers were making massive markups, and the manufacturers responded, probably in part to that, but also in part to inflationary costs by raising the MSRP. And at some point, it comes to a point where, how much is somebody willing to pay for an F-150? If it's now $110,000 and a $50,000 dealer markup, people start walking away. So, Ford, I think, to some extent, wanted their cut of it. I think what you're seeing in the firearms space is, again, more of that trying to find the MSRP. And that really is kind of going to set the ceiling in times of high demand for what it would sell for. And then pretty much every manufacturer has a MAP price that would be then lower, and that would be the lowest that the dealer can advertise it for. And that would be probably closer to what you would generally see it on the street at MAP or a little over MAP when things are a little slower.
Awesome. Very cool. So that's thank you for your candid honesty and actually educating this. I mean, it's always educational. And the fact that, so we covered the pistol braces, the history of that, what's going on with that. We answered the questions on the DS-25, and we talked a little bit about the gun industry. And then if you're watching this in replay, we are going to break this down into individual videos, which you'll be able to consume at the entire time. So thank you for that. And if you have a couple of minutes, we can go for some of the questions. How we're doing time-wise?
Let's jump into some of the questions.
Awesome. And I'm going to take the first question from Michael, not because he was the first to ask the question, but because I just saw that he purchased a couple of really cool SlavGuns patches. So latest update on that. We have awesome glow-in-the-dark patches, and you can purchase them on our website, luxgun.com. They're right on there. And if you're a channel member, there is a discount code for that as well. Just go onto the community tab. If you want to support the channel, do become a channel member. Do send a super chat. We'll absolutely address those questions as soon as they come in. And with that, let us roll. So the first question Michael had, and this was partly, I'm biased. Will we see the introduction of new Darkstorm products on SlavGuns, our go-to accurate media outlet?
So yes, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we have some new stuff coming out at SHOT Show, and Max will definitely be getting one of those. He's already picked out his color and such. So we'll hopefully get him that gun in December. He can put it under his Christmas tree, and we'll be able to see a nice review on that. We're rolling out this new gun, and we've got about 24 of them going out to a variety of key reviewers on YouTube and Instagram. And yeah, SlavGuns is one of those.
And there will be, and I know you threw out a couple of other ideas that I'm kind of really getting excited about, just to see the impact on that, and really turning the AR platform into both a hunting platform and turning it more into a precision rifle platform as well. So that'll be cool. And I guess I'll kind of tease it here. It looks like the person who controls my purse strings and my calendar, she did give me a couple of dates, so I will possibly be making a trip to Florida that last week of December, or actually the first week of December. So we're going to get some sunlight, and I might have to stop by somewhere for a couple of days. So
yeah, definitely, we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Okay, so since these questions are right next to each other, will we see DS9 Typhoon firearms in 9mm on sale for Christmas?
So not from us. The DS9 platform is kind of a legacy platform at this point. We're phasing out production on that. It's just my engineering head. It's never been a good design. There were some licensing issues where we had to, like the last round bolt hold open. We didn't like it. There's a lot of compromise that goes into working with those Glock magazines. And we had it pretty well worked out with the original Gen 3 Glock magazines. And then Glock made changes to Gen 4, and then more changes in Gen 5 to the seat height that for the last round bolt hole open. And it's really wreaked havoc with that. So we're working on, and again, you talk about as things slow down, research and development. We've got on the roadmap a completely new 9mm platform.
Nice.
It is definitely a little while away still, but I think when it comes out, it'll be a real game changer. And again, just like any of our firearms, the goal would be to offer that in configurations for a variety of different states.
Not to put you on the spot, so I don't remember if I have a DS9 or not. Don't hold it against me. But I did shoot a bunch of the DS9. I didn't have any issues. So now you're basically bringing up that with the new generation of magazines, there are potential issues. So how do other manufacturers that produce a 9mm AR, are customers just basically getting a subpar gun, or are they engineered differently? You're kind of like, do they not hold themselves to the same standards?
Probably a combination of things. There are different methodologies you can use for last round bolt hole open.
Okay.
And I think the one that we ended up with was not the best solution. And a variety of patents protect different configurations. So until we can come up with something better on the Glock, and again, the big problem is that contact point for the last round bolt hole open is in the front of the magazine on the Glock mags, which is just not ideal for a rifle configuration. Works great on the Glock pistol.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're looking at is adapting a different type of magazine in there.
Cool.
And there are a couple of other magazines that would work in there that are much more suited to that platform.
Well, actually, here's a thought for you. So I remember at SHOT Show, Mean Arms, they had that conversion that it's a conversion that you stick into a PMAG and it feeds 9mm. But I guess but that was meant to use with the 9mm upper on a regular AR-15 lower.
Correct. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what we're looking at is a basically a completely new proprietary
Awesome.
platform that's engineered specifically to be a 9 millimeter, sub gun slash rifle.
Very cool. All right. Band state question. Will DSI continue to use the Fortson fixed rifle stock?
Absolutely. Alan Thornton's a good friend of mine. We're going to do everything we can to continue to work with him. Again, he like many of us had some struggles over the last year and a half in terms of the financial state of the industry. But yeah, we're absolutely going to keep working with him. We may see some limitations on the colors. Olive drab has been an issue. The cost to do a full production run on them based on the sales volume is just not quite in balance right now. We're hoping with things picking up that we can kick in enough to get us over that hurdle.
Very cool. So we kind of answered this one. So any idea when the DS-25 Typhoon will be available for purchase? So Q2 of next year is when you are saying that
Are
it's going to be.
hoping, or yeah, are hoping for production released at that point to start shipping.
Okay, so that's basically when the guns are going to be ready to go. Rather than, are you going to be taking pre-orders or anything earlier on, or I guess basically once you finish, hey, you know what, we're happy with how it is.
Yeah, I guess we got to take a look at where we sit with that, and then we'll have an allocation based on how many are in that production run, how many are going to go to the different channels, how many are going to go to distributors, dealers, and how many will be available for retail. We do still have some open back orders that didn't get filled from that initial run that we have to take care of first.
Okay. So as far as the configurations, I know we were talking about having it as a pistol configuration, a non-NFA configuration, and a regular rifle configuration. And then beyond that, you were talking about build your own kits. Is that still on the table, or kind of like what are your plans with it now?
So fundamentally, we're on the rifle right now,
Okay.
and the expectation will be that of the we'll be back first with the 16-inch 308, and then possibly a 6.5 Creedmoor. We started working on that, and again, that was one of the things that led us to see some problems. We did suspend development on the non-NFA because the braces were out, and there just was zero demand really for short barrels over the last year or so. So if things stay in the current freedom period, then we'll probably revisit that again, next year. And again, that might be something that will be shipping for fall of next year if things go smoothly.
Very cool. All right. And this question, I swear, I did not prompt him to ask this question. How about that new 22 ARC cartridge, or for that matter, 6 ARC?
Yeah. Is that like your other screen name on there?
It's
So,
not. Okay, I have my laptop here, but I promise I'm not doing this. I'm not paying anybody to bring up this question, but it's a cool cartridge. And it's like, so DSI makes really accurate guns. I love the features. I love the value proposition, but let's put it this way. Right now, I have more ARs in non 223/556 cartridge. And especially since like these new cartridges, I mean, I'm not asking you to do 224 Valkyrie. It's like I'm not a sadist, but you do have cool cartridges. So 300 Blackout is going to be great for home defense. It's going to be great for anybody who can shoot it suppressed. I think it's kind of pointless shooting it unsuppressed. You have like 350 Legend for hunting, which is basically becoming really popular in the Midwest states. And all the precision rifle guys, like people like Hornady is putting a ton of marketing dollars and pushes behind the 6 ARC, and now basically they just Sammy spec the 22 ARC. And you have barrels coming out there. You have actually, believe it or not, you have brass and reloading dies already out there in mass.
So no plans on the 22 ARC at this time. And the problem we always run into is the cost of development divided by the number of guns we're going to sell. And it's funny you brought up 224 Valkyrie, because that was actually one of the ones that we did grab onto and developed. And basically, we have to run about 100 guns in a batch as the smallest batch. So we ran 100 of the 224 Valkyries. And I guess I'll basically say we got our ass handed to us in terms of the sales. It took us probably 2 years to sell through those. A lot of people were interested, but nobody was actually buying. And that became the challenge. And again, we've seen the same thing. We've seen so many cartridges come and go. It's tough uh, to develop this stuff, particularly on a semi-automatic platform. Um, and unless you really know that there's going to be some orders behind it, and there's got to be a drive from either some of the distributors or really say, hey, we want to buy, we're going to commit to buy a couple hundred of these and things like that to make it work. That said, we are working on something that we're going to show at SHOT Show. It's not a production product at this point, and we had a little bit of conversation on this. We've been talking for a while about developing a bolt action AR, and that would be an upper receiver assembly that would work on your standard lower. That would be a traditional bolt action lift and pull back, not a slide, just standard mechanism. And we have developed that product a fair way through. So we're going to have out at SHOT Show a couple prototypes of that, some of which in short barrel 300 blackout. Because what do you want a bolt gun for? Well, maybe you're going to use it for hunting. So if you're going to go out with some varmint hunting, there might be some interest in that. But we're also going to.
I will interject in this. Why would you want a bolt gun? Because let's say, for example, you want the features of a modern sporting rifle, but you live in a banned state where if it's a semi-auto, you can't have any of the cool stuff on it. But if it's a bolt gun, you can do anything you want on the gun.
Correct. There are also some states that have restrictions on hunting with semi-automatics.
Yep.
So, again, there's a variety of needs. And in this case, I'll be honest, it's probably more of we have the solution with what's the problem. So we're trying to figure out what the problem is. And one of the thoughts was, again, those shorter barrels, 300 blackout, run a can on the end of it, folding stock, small, lightweight package. So we're going to have some of those to take a look at. And we also made a 16-inch version in 6mm arc. So that'll be our first toe in the water on that. And we'll see how that shoots and, what some of that feedback is. And if we get a lot of interest in that or 22 arc, we might go down the road of taking a look at that for the full-blown semi-automatic platform.
But basically, let's say, for example, if there's a dealer watching or there's a small distributor watching and they like everything that you have and they would want to do, let's say, a one-off, and they would be able to place a minimum order quantity in sufficient amounts, you'd be open to customizing or doing a special edition for them.
Yeah, the problem becomes if you try to do, a small batch of them, say, oh, we want to do 20 of them, you really start to become cost prohibitive. I mean, it would be like $4,000 a gun. And, the reality is we're still not really recouping that engineering expense.
Yeah.
You really have to get into the hundreds and hundreds of guns to make it work. And that's tougher for someone like us on that cartridge. And probably also the reason you don't see those cartridges being developed by a Ruger or a Smith & Wesson for the most part. It's smaller companies that are willing to roll the dice on something and see what happens. And like I said, we did it on the 224 Valkyrie, and I hate to say it, it's kind of a whole chain of it. We did a 6.8 SPC, a 6.5 Grendel at one point.
6.5 Grendel is I talking to some of the other industry peers, like I said, 6.5 Grendel is a really popular seller for them. And even like right now, 6 Arc, because, well, let's put it this way, you can't let federal screwing you tarnish and and cloud your judgment on there. Actually, people are really excited about it. And I think one of the best performing videos on this channel so far with it's like over 120 or 140,000 views is the what you need to know about 6 Arc. And even though what's interesting is like you go into the stores and people are actually asking, hey, do you have anything in 6.5 Grendel or 6 Arc? And the cool part is because 6.5 Grendel and 6 Arc, the only difference realistically is just the barrel itself because it uses the same bolt. It's a different process versus, let's say, for example, like talking somebody into 224 Valkyrie, because now you no longer really have 6.8 SPC. Then you had the 6.8 SPC, 6.8 SPC Spec 2. You had the issues basically with 224 Valkyrie where the cartridge comes out, but then Spear, actually, Sierra, they designed that 90 grain bullet, and the first ones, the jackets were flying off of the bullets. So they went back and we changed the twist rate. But by that time, everybody kind of went back down to shooting 50 and 60 grain out of 224 Valkyrie. So that was just a complete mess of a launch. But generally speaking, I think 6 Arc people are really, really happy with, and 22 Arc looks really interesting for like the varmint crowd. So It could be interesting. Could be interesting. Okay, I got a great idea for you. You're gonna love this, and I'll even give it to you for free. I'll do it in exchange for one gun. So you know how you're talking about you're gonna be replacing the DS9?
Hmm.
Something that's really
Okay.
cool. You know how like vintage is like back in retro? 45 gap.
Yeah, maybe not.
I say that jokingly, but I do. I love that cartridge. It's I think yeah. I digress. Okay, moving on. Um, if Drew was
So
the original,
I'll bring up one of the, one of the problems with the 6 millimeter arc from an
yeah,
engineering
please,
standpoint is
please,
the, it's a cartridge that very much sits on the borderline of self-destruction in a semi-automatic, in an AR-15 platform.
yes.
There is really it's seeming to end up with almost two classes of ammunition,
There are.
high pressure for a bolt gun and low pressure for the semi-automatics. And there is definitely some concern in the industry if um, people are going to put the high pressure, and some of them we've seen are astronomical numbers in a semi-automatic, in an AR-15 bolt head,
Yeah,
and it's just likely not going to survive that.
yeah.
Some of the
So
numbers are literally approaching the 5.56 proof test
yes.
pressures.
So all of the factory ammo is, and the first spec that came out was the SAMI spec for bolt guns, and that was actually fairly anemic for a lot of them. I do know, so when I run my bolt guns in 6 arc, you can definitely push it about another 150 feet per second faster. Um, but there is no factory ammo available, and as far as I know, Hornady has stated we're not doing that at all. And with 22 arc, that one was specifically meant for the AR platform, and we're not dealing with any of that stuff. The pressures were actually a little bit lower. But I absolutely, I mean, it's a very valid point. I think the biggest opponent to that was the owner and founder of White Oak Armament, and he was like, "Well, this is why we developed it on 6.8 SPC bolthead." However, now it's been around for 2.5 years. I have not actually seen any of the YouTubers or anybody, like, if the bolt is made properly, it's like you generally don't have those issues unless somebody was moronic and be loaded extremely hot. But then again, is that really going to stop anybody from doing that with almost any other caliber as well? As long as the issue with 6 arc is if you have a bolt gun and you're buying factory ammo, which is relatively anemic. But if you have a AR, I mean, people are shooting. I mean, I've shot it out to 12, 1300 yards, and it's just a joy, and it's accurate and all that stuff. And plus, let's be honest. I mean, there's nothing really new with 6 arc. It's 6 millimeter grundle with a shoulder pushed back a little bit. Same thing with 22 arc. I mean, people have been running in the Wildcat cartridges for like 15, 20 years now, something like that. So there's plenty of data behind it. And it's right along the same lines as 6 ppc, which tons of data on, but I digress. Okay, go ahead. You really wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
yeah, I was going to say that's one of the concerns, and one of the things we're going to use this bolt action platform in
Yeah,
6 millimeter arc,
awesome.
that it uses regular AR-15 bolts in the bolt action, and that's one of the cost savings and the engineering savings concepts in it, and that will allow us to test those in a little more of a safe environment than the semi-automatic, and
Yeah,
we'll see what happens, how the bolts hold up.
awesome.
We're
That
continuing to do research on bolts.
Yeah,
We've been doing a lot of messing around with conversational at this point in terms of different materials that can be used in the bolt. Everybody knows Carpenter 158. Everybody knows 9310. There are actually a couple different grades in 9310, three of them at least. So we're doing some messing around with that, and also doing a lot of research right now. There's a huge amount of development that's happened in metallurgy in the last 5 or 10 years, and there are absolutely some amazing materials out there that you could make a much more durable bolt out of. And there's actually a couple companies that do use some of those, but it makes it astronomically more expensive. We priced out one of them recently, and it was coming in at around $100 a pound for the material. So in the bar stock, that means you can get about 3 bolts out of it. So it was about 30 times the price of a standard 9310 material. So
Wow.
obviously we don't want a bolt that's going to come in at $500, even if it lasts a long time.
Wow. Yeah. So you got a fan. A Bolt AR with a concept
Yeah,
makes
there we go.
5.56 accurate, a nice cheap cartridge for the range. I'm interested. All right. So going back, so we answered this one. Can I use the pistol brace I have hidden in the back of the closet that was illegal, or do I need to buy a new one that is blessed by the ATF?
Yeah, again, we're back to 2020. So, fish it out of the lake or, from, behind the toilet, wherever you put it, and put it back on.
Awesome. All right, so here's a question on the tolerances. So at some point you mentioned 4,000s. So 4,000s isn't the most impressive, but good enough. Comments?
Well, yeah, I think he hit it right on the head. Mil spec is good enough. It is the tolerances that they need, and often mil spec is actually quite loose, but partially intentionally so, because the military is buying a lot of product from a lot of different people, and they want to guarantee that when they put that stuff together, it's going to fit. So that they tend to be a little sloppy on that. Yeah, again, we aim our general tolerance we aim for is plus or minus 1 thou.
Okay.
Some of the parts that we make, for example, our takedown and pivot pins, those are holding plus or minus 1/4 of a thou. Extremely tight. A lot of people in the industry are making plus or minus 1 on that, but that's part of what we've done to try to tighten up. If like particularly on the variant 1, there is basically no wobble between the upper and the lower of that. And that's because, again, we keep bringing those tolerances in tighter and tighter.
So here's a question. I know, let's say, for example, when people compare handguns, one of the reasons why, or even let's say, for example, some rifles. So people will always say that one of the reasons why a Glock is as reliable as it is also the reason why it's so loose and sloppy. One of the reasons why AK is so known to be reliable is because, once again, it's loose and sloppy, and it's meant to be for those type of environments. So does it mean that very tight tolerances and that smooth as butter finish, like you'd find in a lot of 1911s, is also the same thing that when you throw a speck of sand in there, the gun just jams up? Does that also apply to AR? So when ARs, when they have very good fit and finish where everything's just super tight, does that impact reliability?
You always do have that risk if you get something in there. And again, you're talking about small differences, but you can get something in there that can cause the malfunction as a result. The AK is well known for being reliable and continuing to cycle under a variety of rough conditions. It's also known for being hard to hit the broadside of a barn with it.
Yes.
And those two tend to go hand in hand as the fitment between different items are looser. What inherently happens is it becomes less accurate. Again, if you look at mil spec for the accuracy of the M4 is 4 MOA. That's a 4-inch group at 100, and that is in a test stand.
Yeah.
That is not Listen, the guns all shoot better than we do for the most part, but that's not us up there with a red dot. That is test stand accuracy. To give you a comparison, the variant 1, Tactical Life magazine it was on the cover back in the spring. They did accuracy testing with 3 production rounds, and they shot between 1/4 and 1/2 MOA with that gun. So, all those little nuances give you that accurate result. The other thing is differences between the AK and the AR. The AR is designed with its dust cover and direct impingement action to be staying clean and then self-cleaning. A lot of people don't understand that the reason you have those vents on the side is to blow anything out that does get in the way there. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Nothing is. Even you'll say a Glock is not, as perfect as they would like it to be. I've had, plenty of malfunctions with the Glocks I own. Yeah. And again, that's the same kind of thing. Again, you mentioned limp wristing. That's a key thing with any of these semi-automatic firearms. It's a balanced equation of energy. And if you create a shock absorber on it, you can absorb enough energy potentially to make it not cycle. Does that mean we should overgas every gun? And the answer is we don't believe so. We're more fans of getting it right. I'll go off into a little aside here, some people may be interested in. We get asked a lot, why do you run a 3-ounce buffer in your guns? And I said, well, the answer is if you want to suppress it or you do something else to change that system, whether it's just you shoot 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 rounds and you get gas port erosion and stuff like that, or you put a suppressor on the end of it, well, how do you adjust it? Well, the easiest way people can adjust the AR is you put a heavier buffer in. So now we move up to an H1 or an H2. Those are pretty readily available.
Mm-hmm.
So now what happens if you buy that gun? And I won't name names, but there are those big companies that come higher gassed and they come with an H2. Now you want to put a can on the end of that. Well, where do you go to? Where are you going to find an H3 or an H4 or H5 or, how do you, well, now what? I got to put an adjustable gas block on it and I got to monkey around with a lot more in the system to try to accommodate that. So we designed, we did our equation with a smaller gas port and a lighter buffer so that we have a better starting point to be able to accommodate those changes. So
very cool.
Difference on why we do what we do.
Very cool. All right. Switching topic just slightly. Michael had a question, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well, or at least, or people will start questioning their sanity with the way that things are happening versus what should happen versus how it actually happens. Who makes the laws regarding firearms? Is it Congress or is it actually other parties?
So there's probably a video on YouTube called Schoolhouse Rock from like 1980.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
How laws are made. And yeah, you're right. Who makes the laws? Congress. But and this also happens on a state level. Those laws often have empowering clauses in them, which then grant authority to the executive branch to promulgate regulations that are in line with those laws. The goal of that is to keep the law from becoming thousands of pages. Wait, they always end up as thousands of pages anyway. And move more of that down to a level where it can be more easily modified and stuff. The key, though, is with those regulations still have to be in line with the law. Okay. And that's where the ATF has really gone awry, is they've, instead of acting on existing language in the law, they're trying to change that language, which they do not have the authority to do. And that's why we're seeing the courts little by little intervene and saying, hey, you can't do that. And these are not necessarily Second Amendment challenges. Again, these are APA or other statutory or regulatory action challenges, more administrative technical challenges, not constitutional cases.
Yeah. So almost in essence, there's like, okay, there's the federal law, then there's the state and local laws, and sometimes they don't agree with each other. And then you have the federal agencies, which are in charge of the law enforcement agencies in charge of enforcing the laws that have their own different interpretations. And those don't agree with anybody. And that's why we have so many cases in the court systems in order to try to get clarity on things.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so this might be a little bit, how can an entire industry be subject to the whims of a political party instead of enacted laws and regulations? Is it time to end the games? And is there a way that this actually gets resolved, or is this how it's going to be going forward?
It's a tough question. And, we live in this little microcosm and look at the Second Amendment in the firearms industry, but this really goes, across a wide swath of industries, gas stoves, refrigerators, a whole variety of appliances have been attacked dramatically on different angles. And yeah, that's been done mostly on a regulatory level, not so much on laws. But even think about automotives. We're back to Ford and stuff. Make electric vehicles or else. Mm-hmm. And that some of that has been done by Congress. Partially indirectly, Congress will say, well, we have this Fuel Efficiency Act we're going to pass, but then we're going to leave it up to the EPA or FHA or some other three-letter agency to figure out exactly what those numbers should be. But the end result becomes, regulation that dramatically drives up the cost of engineering and the cost of production. Cars are very expensive today because they have to have great fuel economy. They have to have great safety. Is that what a lot of the people want? Yeah, quite possibly. But it's still better off to let the free market decide that than to regulate all of that. And some of this stuff takes, again, we talk about these court cases taking time. Some of this regulation takes a massive amount of time. I just built a new house down here in Florida as part of my move, and we had trouble getting a refrigerator. We had trouble getting a dishwasher.
Wow.
What were the issues with it? Well, believe it or not, it was a 30-year-old regulation. One of these international accords on greenhouse gases, and that's actually coming to affect any industry right now that uses compressed gas to do heat cycles. So your air conditioners, your refrigerators, the new dishwashers, because the new dishwashers are not allowed to use electric heat anymore in them, so they have to use a heat pump. So again, it's been a big change that's been forced upon by, in some cases, the whim of one party or both parties, and we're stuck with it often. It's very hard to repeal laws. Laws and regulations tend to get enacted and not removed.
Very cool. Comment, not a question. DSI is one of the few firearms manufacturers notable for commitment to precision and quality.
Thank you.
This is actually
we do our
one.
best.
How much of an impact did political ideology of New York have on Darkstorm Industries' move to Florida to expand operations?
Quite significant. We were definitely concerned about the future in New York. There were cost analysis too on building a new facility. Those didn't end up quite being as good as we had hoped. It's gotten quite expensive to build down here in Florida because of the huge population shift from COVID. But we had been planning that move from before. But absolutely, we saw the concern over legislation that had been proposed in Nevada, which made it outright illegal to manufacture what they were calling a quote unquote assault weapon. So, the concern was something like that could be passed in New York. And then basically it's and I believe Massachusetts had also proposed it too. And that was in part why I believe Troy moved and Smith & Wesson moved out of Massachusetts, just the threat of that. And New York never threatened that. But, again, we butted heads with Governor Cuomo a few times, and we have litigated against the state on a number of occasions, both directly and indirectly. We're doing it again right now over the semi-automatic rifle licenses. So we are definitely not someone looked on favorably, and we saw a huge swing of being on the governor's "I hate them" list to being welcomed with open arms and by the politicians in Florida and other states that we looked at as well.
Yeah. And one of the peculiar parts is, so when people from outside of New York look at New York, they're like, oh, wow, that's just like a liberal home base. But in reality, the vast majority of the state is actually fairly conservative and rural. It's just the 5 boroughs of New York City plus the 6 borough in Pennsylvania, the Stroudsburg, the Poconos area. That's realistically where you have the liberal bastion. And I would even say possibly not even Staten Island. Staten Island is leaning conservative as well, but it's basically those 4 boroughs that seem to control the entire state itself.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things that comes into play with the election cycles of your legislative branches is it's based on population. And there was actually a case on this a couple of years ago, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and unfortunately it didn't go the way many of it had hoped. So power is granted by way of how many seats you have, how many people represent. And it's done based on the straight population. It is not necessarily done on the voting population or the citizen population. So you actually have some interesting things that happen in both large cities like New York, and even in small rural areas where there are large colleges present. And you get some quirky things of, well, what's the population of the area and how much representation should it have? And, we have some of that in New York, where New York City has a massive population that gets a big chunk of the voting block, and they can basically outvote everybody else. If you look at the status of Long Island after the elections about a week ago, Long Island is pure red. It is all Republican. It is very conservative, and they have come out and voted. Sadly, what's happened is upstate has not. And the last couple election cycles, it's my belief that most of the people up there are conservative and do have those
or, or,
beliefs.
or they just
But
burned out.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of what the speculation is at this point. Is they're just burnt out and they're not coming out to vote. You get low voter turnout, and Lee Zeldin came so close to winning the governor's race, and had upstate really turned out, he could have won, and it would be a very different state than Kathy Hochul took it as a mandate that she can do what she wants. The question is how recoverable is it. They're working on a starting the budget process right now, and I know there've been rumors they're talking about they're going to be $5 billion short. So where do you think New York State's going to come up with $5 billion? They've been skirting it for a
Ukraine.
few years
They're going to
because
get
they
it
have
from the budget.
yeah. Egypt, or where was Jersey Senator Menendez getting his money from? So they were living high on the COVID money, but all that's gone now. So it's an unknown of how they're going to move forward.
Awesome. All right, here's a question for you from Nick, who is our resident New Jersey administrator of NewJerseyGunForums.com.
Mm-hmm.
Any interest in building NJ legal AR pistol, either super lightweight like the carbon, and I think there's one other one, or a fixed mag option?
We do currently build fixed mag ARs for New Jersey and a couple other states. And they were selling reasonably well. We had a number of dealers that were selling them in volume. And then with the pistol brace ban, that all ground to a halt. So we'll see. I haven't gotten any orders for them yet from Jersey dealers. But again, I think that was something that with the pistol braces, that'll be back. And it's again, it's the same platform. It's just a shorter barrel and no front vertical grip.
Now, is it possible for you guys to do something like that Bushmaster Carbon before they finished up with that? So basically, it's super lightweight, no barrel shroud or anything else like that, so you can still have a removable magazine.
So I'd have to check the laws in Jersey. They're still more of the older 1994 language.
Yeah.
So that might be a possibility.
It has to hit a
in New
weight.
Jersey.
Yeah. It has to hit.
Yeah.
Actually, Nick, I'm sure you're in here still. What's the other pistol that's there? And kind of like, I think generally the sticking point was, so if they didn't do a brace on it, it was just a buffer tube, but it was just nice and lightweight, and no barrel shroud, but interchangeable mags. And like, I think almost like anybody who's had one at I think it's X-Star, or I think they had one as well.
Yeah, so X-Star makes an all plastic AR-15 pistol. They are around, obviously. Bushmaster, the name is still around, but they're not anymore. We did do a ultralight as a prototype technology demonstrator quite a number of years ago, and that was in the sub 4-pound range.
50 ounces.
And that was for a 16-inch rifle. So
Wow.
I think it's quite possible we could get down to 50 ounces. I'll have to take a look at it and see what we could do and where we could shave off weight and if that would be viable. And again, would that be legal? So like, are the X-Stars currently legal in Jersey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
so
and
that's.
I would say the other concept that somebody had, what was it? I think it's the guys that make the Nick, who was. It's the one with like the regular rifle grip on the back. It's the gun that you were interested in. We shot it.
Used to be Airs.
Yes.
And now it is. What's the name?
Fight Light.
Yeah, they're right down the road from us here. They're
yes, they are.
Yeah, it's the gun coast. There's so many gun manufacturers here. It's insane.
I guess we're all the same people who swear, right? We started in the aerospace industry and now we make guns. Okay, so X-Star has a proprietary buffer system BCG and a polymer low receiver, even polymer hammer and fire control group parts. Interesting.
Yeah, so they were ahead of the curve, 3D printing.
Yes. All right. What happened to Norm? What did I miss? I'm sorry, I don't star.
Yeah, so Norm passed away about 2-3 months ago now. Yeah, he was quite young. He had a lot of issues with his hips and his back, and developed some neural issues with his spine, and unfortunately, the time came where he had to say goodbye.
No.
So Yeah, sadly, Norman's left the building.
It's also like a breed issue as well, no? Or there's
They're,
mostly like a
they're,
breathing thing.
they're known to have some issues, yeah, with breathing and also with their rear hips. He just had,
Oh.
it worse. So
I know it might still be a little too soon. Or is there going to be is going to be a new mascot that's going to keep
not at
going?
this point. There had been
Still
some
early.
discussion of it prior, but there will still likely we're kicking around doing some new norm patches and stuff like that. Kind of like the RCA dog. He died 80 years ago, but RCA still uses him as a mascot. It's just a computer
Yes.
generated version now.
You need special patches to honor him.
Yes.
There we go. Question for you, and this is actually a great question. I don't think I ever covered it. What does DSI recommend for gun lubrication for its products to keep parts moving and reject contaminants and clean how often? And I would say, how critical is it? What's actually, are you supposed to give like the gun a complete deep dive in cleaning? I mean, basically you have people who are cleaning the bores on the guns. I generally, unless it's a Glock, I don't think you need to. It's just the other components that basically need to. And I would say if you clean the gun, now you got to zero it in again because.
Yeah, so I guess kind of our general take on this. So as far as which product we recommend Lucas Oil. We've had really great luck with
Yes,
them.
I've
We
used them
do
as
include
well.
a little sample pack in there with all of it. They have a good CLP product. They have some good bore and bolt cleaners. As far as what to clean, I mean, the vast majority of what you're going to have to deal with is really the bolt carrier group, and it depends on how much you shoot your gun and stuff like that. General consensus is you go out, you go for a range day. At the end, you come home, you clean your gun.
Okay.
Is that over cleaning it? Yes, that is over cleaning it. But at the same time, if it's going to sit potentially for a long period of time, you don't want to let that all cake on and get in there too hard. The other things to note on it, don't start taking stuff apart. Don't take your gas tube off. Don't try to take your gas block off. You do not need to clean in there. Do not mess with the barrel bore. Do not run
Okay.
wire brushes down there. The simple answer is it is a self-cleaning system. When you shoot that bullet down there, that bullet does not fit in that bore. It goes down that bore because it has a massive amount of pressure behind it. It will take anything off that is in there. You do need to clean the chamber a little bit because you will have some debris and stuff that ends up in there. But you can just use, there's a variety of different wipes and I don't say little foamy things and stuff to get in there and to try to clean that up. But don't go running a wire brush down that bore. You can do damage to the lands and the grooves with that.
Now, is there still corrosive 5.56 ammo? And if somebody does find corrosive ammo, would that have an impact on the cleaning schedule or anything else like that?
I mean, our general guidance is to avoid any of that stuff.
Okay.
And for the most part, most of that seemed to have been long gone.
Yeah.
Enter COVID. And now we have seen a lot more stuff come from overseas that is very questionable in its origin
or
and spec.
Where they dug it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, literally. I mean, we had bought a skid of 308 in metal cans from one of the distributors for the store. Things were hard to get, and got them, and it was like this says like 1992 on it or something like that. And it was made a long time ago, and we opened up the cans, and it wasn't too pretty inside. It looked like they had been buried out on a beach somewhere and dug up later.
Okay. So. Very cool. Do you recommend any barrel break-in procedures or just go shoot the thing?
I mean, there's different arguments on that. My tact on it is just go shoot the thing.
Perfect. That answers that question. Okay. 2 final questions. We're going to have one from the audience, and then I'm going to have one for you. So from Peter, I know he's actually been a big supporter of DSI. He actually asked the question, which I think which you already answered, which was, I was like looking for it, I couldn't find it, but the question was originally, are you now going to be shipping non-NFA firearms to New Jersey?
Yes, we actively are already.
Okay, perfect. And then his follow-up question, and what light system do you gentlemen prefer, Surefire or Cloud Defense for an AR setup?
So my personal go-to has been Surefire.
Okay. Well, since that was such a concise answer, just to confirm, nor bore brushes with a power drill.
No. No power drills for cleaning.
All right.
Yeah.
Now the final question is one that I've been asked, and I'm going to turn into a short or a quick video that way, but it's a common one. And that question is, when it comes to firearms, I know you offer a number of different finishes. I know other manufacturers offer different finishes. So um, we have Cerakoted, we have God, what's so okay. Let me start it again because we're going to make this pretty. Um, so when it comes to firearms finishes, there's a number of options. So you have everything from anodized, which I think you've done in the past, and then you have manufacturers who are offering different types of Cerakote finishes. And then when it comes to handguns, there's other different types of finishes that way. What's your take on it? What are some of the pros and cons that somebody would know? Hey, this is the type of finish on a firearm that I should be looking for.
So there's a variety of finishes that get used out there. So on the anodizing front, there are two finishes. There's a type 2 and a type 3 anodizing. They're done with slightly different processes and you get very different results. We use both in different products. All of our standard guns, you buy a Typhoon, you buy a Lightning, you buy I believe the variant went off for now. Those are all type 3. That's a hard coat. So it is a anodizing aluminum oxide that's about 1/1000th of an inch thick. That is done both in black and color. It's dyed. It's a kind of grayish with a little bit of strange yellow to it without any dye on it. That is a very durable coating. A type 2 anodizing is a very, 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 very thin. It's about 1/10,000th of an inch thick anodized coating that's really more just about absorbing a dye. So you basically end up with a colored gun that's not too durable. We do use that in some of our specialty, what we call Gucci guns. They're splash anodized. So if you see some of these vibrant colors and patterns, one of them that we've done looks like a color case hardened, but it's on aluminum. That's a type 2. And those are guns that the reality is those are going to sit in your safe or in a display case. They're not a go-to battle gun. So you want to make sure that anything you buy that is really going to be a defense or a durable gun, you want to make sure it's got that type 3 hard coat on it. And I wish I could say there was some easy way to check that and test that. I have seen a number of major manufacturers that are doing type 2 on it just because it's a lot cheaper, and they'll pass it off improperly as just an anodized or hard anodized, and it's really not. As far as Cerakote, the variant 1 is our current production model that uses a Cerakote. It's very important if you buy or have something Cerakoted that it is anodized first. Cerakote by itself is extremely hard and it is extremely brittle. Think of it as an eggshell. So you need to, if you put it over straight aluminum, aluminum is relatively soft and it will be subject to chipping and fracturing, particularly on corners and things like that. If you put it over anodized, it will be much, much, much more durable. So all of our guns that are Cerakoted are anodized with a type 3 hard coat first. In terms of Cerakote, there are really two major lines of Cerakote in the firearms industry. There's your primary mainstay Cerakote, which is what almost everybody uses. And then there's another one called HIR. And HIR was developed for the military probably about a decade ago. And it only became available to the commercial manufacturers for commercial sales, I want to say about a year ago now. So one of our new products that's coming out at SHOT Show, this new MFR rifle, will utilize this HIR Cerakote. And the big difference is that it is non-reflective to infrared light. So the typical matte black anodized M4, M16, AR-15, whatever you want to call it, firearm, if you look at it with visible light at night, it pretty well disappears. But now you take that same exact firearm and you look at it through some of the night vision optics that rely on the infrared spectrum to boost the available light, and it pops out, it reflects IR tremendously. So that was a big problem for the military. So they developed this mil-spec, and Cerakote responded with this coating. So that coating will be on our new MFR rifles with the goal of making them more invisible both on the visible spectrum as well as the infrared night vision spectrum.
Okay. And so there was a comment, wow, good. Like I'm just like sitting there, I'm like, wow, that is actually a lot of things and a lot of things to consider. So durability wise, or kind of like what's the differentiating the point if somebody has an option between a Cerakote or the new HFI, the new
HIR.
HIR, or a traditional anodized, how would somebody determine this is the one I should go for or not? And what's going to be, I guess, more durable, etc.
So, I mean, the hard coat anodizing, a type 3 anodizing is going to be your durable finish over the aluminum. That's kind of your base level minimum. If you want to put a Cerakote on top of that, again, the Cerakote on top of that will depend significantly on the durability of the anodizing underneath. Really, what it gives you is a lot more color choices. Colored anodizing and anodizing in general is very subject to the whim of the material. So when you're using 7075, when you're using these better grades of aluminum, it's an alloy. So it's got other other materials, other elements mixed in with the aluminum to make that alloy. And that shows in the anodizing. So the anodizing is an aluminum oxide that grows, almost think of it like a plant, and it grows with roots into the aluminum halfway, and then it grows like the plant out of the aluminum. So half your thickness is inside where the original surface was, and half is outside. But it only grows where there's aluminum. It doesn't grow where there's, for example, magnesium in the alloy. So you'll end up with a slightly uneven, and depending on how well that batch of aluminum mixed at the smelter, you can end up with some strange patterning and stuff like that that shows through when you do colors other than black. You also have a variety of getting that shade exactly right is hard because, again, it's like growing a plant. Everyone is different. So we can put a rack together and the anodizer will drop it in and we'll anodize it and then dye it and they'll take it out. And it was the same upper receivers made out of the same aluminum plate, dyed it on the same tank at the same time, and they all look a little different. And this is why if you look at the Typhoons in the anodized colors, you'll see that the upper is a different color than the lower, just slightly. If you look at the FN Scar, you'll see again that there's a difference in their coloration between the different products on there. 50 Shades of Flat Dark Earth is the kind of the joke with that. But so you get a lot of variation. If you want the whole gun to exactly match, then the Cerakote is the better solution for you. It's going to give you a consistent color across all of it. We've even found that in the aluminum we buy for billet comes as a plate, so it's run as a inch and three quarter or two and a quarter inch thick plate, like 8 feet, 10 feet wide out of the mill. When that gets cut into billets and machined, the lower receivers, we turn the plate this way is how it sits in the gun. The upper receiver, the plate is this way, and just that grain structure is perpendicular, that you'll have a different look in the anodizing of the upper versus the lower.
Wow. So basically, if you want durable, you go hard coat anodized, so type 3 anodizing. If you want a cool color, you go Cerakote, but make sure it's over an anodized finish first. But it's
Correct.
still not going to last as long, basically. And if you're a tactical Timmy, then you want the new HIR finish on the new gun.
Correct. Yeah. If you feel you're going to run into a situation where you want to be hidden from other people with night vision, then you're going to want the HIR coating. Yeah. And
Awesome.
it's a little more expensive, but like I said, we feel it's the right fit for this new product we're developing.
Fantastic. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Okay. One final one, I promise, I swear, and then we're going to wrap up this one. This is from Peter. What's your thoughts on the Huxwork 3D printed suppressors? I will add an annotation to this. So Huxwork is a company, they're well known for their flow-through technology. So you can basically, they swear by, you can take one of their cans, also known as former OSS cans, throw it on any gun. You don't need to make any adjustments. And I will add it, and if we can bring it to DSI, so for the people who are not in a restricted state that can purchase a suppressor, are DSI guns basically, I guess, what we call suppressor ready, or would they need to make any adjustments on the guns to make them run?
So we'll say there's three categories of suppressors out there. There's some of your old school baffled, your old AACs,
Hmm.
welded stainless. They have a high back pressure. They will require a modification to the buffer system. You'll have to run a heavier buffer in order to run those on a DSI gun. They'll have that impact on any gun. Then you had kind of the mid-generation, some of your Surefire SOCOM RC2 concept. It's a lower back pressure, a little better design, a little just newer technology. And those in general, you can put on a DSI gun, and that gun will run well. It'll run slightly over gas, but it'll run perfectly. Huxworks is part of and I'm going to pick in particular on their 3D printed flow-through designs. That is the next generation. That is the newer technology. And those create very little back pressure. And those run obviously phenomenal on almost anything because you're not adding any back pressure. So you're not modifying that equation of how much pressure and how much spring and how much weight you need. Huxworks in general, I'll say they're a partner company. We do a lot of work with them.
They're in Florida too. They're like close to you as well, right?
No, they're not.
Okay.
So if you follow them on their social media, you'll see a variety of Darkstorm Industries guns that a couple of their sales reps go out and travel around with a DSI rifle.
Nice.
And do all their demos with it. So yeah, you'll probably also see some Huxworks suppressors at our booth at SHOT Show. So yeah, absolutely love them. And the 3D printing with Inconel, some of these high nickel alloys and titanium is really revolutionizing the suppressor industry. And we've seen some concepts with basically like AI generated, almost like tube worm, crazy organic form shapes that I think once they really get that stuff into production, will even further revolutionize stuff you couldn't machine, but we can 3D print it.
Yeah, and that's basically the major difference. So traditionally, things are you start with a big block of metal and then you shave it down, but then you're still limited to the type of machines that can do that. But when you're going with a 3D printer, it's an additive process. So you're literally putting in whatever you want to do. So you can come up with these designs, and now you add in AI to do the methodology and actually create a lot of the stuff for you. And I'm sure we're using it for testing as well. That it's an exciting time. It definitely, even for guns.
Yeah, we saw about 10 years ago at SHOT Show a company that was doing a sandcast titanium suppressor, and that was the first of this concept of, wasn't quite an organic form, but a really strangely chambered inside, spin this area around and mix it all different directions suppressor. And it was like, wow, this thing is insane. And they said, well, how much are they going to be? And they said, well, we feel we can produce them for about $12,000 a piece in volume. I said, okay, I don't think you're going to have much of a market at that is the problem. But, that concept has now been the evolution. And now with 3D printing, you're able to produce that suppressor for $1,200 now in concept.
Very cool. All right, so we are going to end it right there. There are more questions coming in, but I will leave them as a comment. I will email them to Ed, and what I'm going to have is Ed can make those quick 60-second YouTube shorts, and that's going to be good questions for them as well, good content. So I'm going to, instead of me,
I'll give Peter his last one here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Go ahead. Fine, go ahead.
12 and a half. So I love 12 and a half inch barrels. I've been a fan of them for a long time. Before they were as cool as they are now. Is it the optimal barrel length? Absolutely not. It is the perfect compromise. It is, it's if you can only have one and try to do everything with it, I feel it's the best for that. You start to get a 10 and a half inch, you're just giving up way too much velocity, except for real hardcore CQB. You get a big gain to 11. You get a pretty substantial gain to 12 and a half. Now you're at something where you can get out to 300 yards with a decent velocity. It's small enough that you can put a can on the end to be in that 16 to 18 inch range. So it's kind of the way we look at it is it's the perfect compromise. It doesn't do anything amazing, but it does everything pretty well.
Very cool. All right. So on that, thank you everybody for joining. Ed, I'm going to leave it with this comment. Thanks, Ed, for your expertise tonight. Anyone considering a better firearm should have DSI on their
Thank you,
short
Michael.
list. You have a bunch of fire emojis and people excited about seeing you and the new cool stuff at SHOT Show. So this was definitely very, very educational. I would say it's also exciting. It's exciting about where we are as an industry. Kind of like, I mean, we've been losing ground. We got some of it back, and just even seeing how the industry's progressing forward. And it seems like for gun owners, at least, it's going to be a pretty exciting time going in the next couple of years as prices seems like they're going to come down a little bit. Versus where we were. And it looks like there's going to be a lot of new innovative products that are going to be coming out as well, no matter whether you're looking at guns or accessories. So, Ed, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us for the last couple of hours. We are going to be breaking this down into a couple of smaller videos. I know there's a little bit of volume echo issue, so we will fix that in post and release them as varying long and short form videos as well. And Ed, hopefully you can join us in the future as well and discuss some of the topics you really want to discuss.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, maybe we can do something when you come down and visit, and or even out at SHOT Show.
Oh, at SHOT Show, we're definitely doing stuff. So
Do some live streaming. There we go.
that's
I mean, that's the place to do it. Then we can show all
that's
the
a given.
goodies.
No, we can't. Not on a live stream. They shut down a lot. So on a live stream, you can't. Well, actually, on some platforms, you can. Well, we'll definitely take a look at that. All right. So thank you guys, everybody, for joining us on not on our regular night. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see you guys next. Well, I guess next on Sunday night. And if we go past midnight, we're going to be celebrating my 41st birthday. So Ed, thank you everybody. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for the guys who purchased our patches. They did get shipped, so they'll be here next Monday actually, and they'll be going out to everybody and go from there. Good night.